Hey everyone, happy Golden Jubilee to Microsoft celebrating 50. Wow, what does that make the rest of us? You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Monday. It's Alan Schemmel for Techstrong Gang. As I mentioned in our opening, a Golden Jubilee celebrated by Microsoft. It kind of officially makes them middle age, I think, though 50 is the new 30, or something like that, they say. We've got that and a lot more to talk about on this beautiful Monday. Hope you all had a great Valentine's Day weekend. Let me introduce you to our gang members for today as we jump into things. First of all, she's still in her Valentine's Day red, looking good. She is the editor of Techstrong AI, Gestalt IT, AI expert here, Sulagna. Hey, Sulagna, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Also joining us from where we hear there might be snow flurries up in the mountains of New Mexico. She's CEO of Deploy Hub, Aurelius, open source, all-around open source guru and Linux Foundation member, Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
Hello, Alan. And yeah, 50 years for Microsoft. It's kind of shocking, actually. I hope 50 is the new 30.
Well, if they're 50, my thought was, if Microsoft's 50, when did I first become aware of Microsoft? But
I thought the same question.
Anyway, jumping over from New Mexico to Harrison, New York, and that's not named for any of the presidents last named Harrison, as we found out last week. He's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, welcome. It's great to have you on.
Good to see you guys as always.
Yeah. So let's jump into it, Mike. I think you went down last week. You went down to the city to help celebrate this Golden Jubilee.
Yeah, Microsoft is hosting a series of receptions at their offices around the country, and they were in New York last week. And it was nice to see a lot of folks that I had not seen in a while. And I always kind of looked at them and I said, wow, man, they got old. And then I thought about it for a minute and I'm like, geez, maybe I got old too. So I don't know. And it was interesting though, because it made everybody kind of, a little bit wiggy about 50, and then they all got a little nostalgic, which, was always nice to do. But I also looked back in time and I thought about, geez, all these intense battles and arguments that people had over the years. And as I look at them now, they all seem a little petty. And I was just kind of like scratching my head going, maybe we don't spend enough time on the right things, or we just kind of argue too much about things. But even so, today, there's still this little vibe out of Microsoft about, they want to be the dominant player, and they keep referring to things like Azure as the world's computer. And, they still have that little edge on them where they're kind of like, we want to own everything. And so it's just kind of an odd time still, but we are seeing Bill Gates write some reflective pieces on AI and where things are going. I suspect we'll see a lot of these pieces over the coming year. But Alan, how are you feeling about Microsoft these days?
Pretty much as I always felt. But you know what, Mike, listening to you, I agree. I think, for so long, they were so omnipotent in my lifetime, right? In my career, in terms of technology, right? I guess IBM was like that before them. I guess in the 50s, 60s, even early 70s, IBM was this monolithic behemoth. Microsoft was that in my career for the most part. And it was okay to knock them. It was okay to throw stones at them. It was okay to make fun of them. It was okay to hate them in some circles, right? They were the evil empire, right? Much like everybody wanted the Eagles to win because Kansas City became the evil empire in football, right? Two straight Super Bowls. And, it was okay. And the refs were favoring them. And, Microsoft's gotten a bad rap, but look at what they've done. Look at what they've done No matter, I mean, from the PC to the Office apps to the cloud, when Microsoft puts its mind to something, I tell you, there's no other company out there that does it. Two things I want to cite, and then Tracy, I know you want to say something. First of all, our office is here in Techstrong in Boca Raton, Florida. There wouldn't be a Boca Raton, Florida as we know it had it not been for Microsoft. IBM came down here and they built the PC here. Don Estridge had the IBM team that built the PC. It was down here right in Boca Raton, Florida, the original Silicon something. But the IBM PC was nothing until it had an operating system. And some young-haired college dropout kid came down here and signed a deal here. The building is still there. The room he signed it in is there. If you're there, you could do a press conference in that room. He signed a licensing deal with IBM for something called DOS, Disk Operating System. And nothing's ever been the same. Right? That was the start of the modern PC. And, then you look at Windows and how they deal, they dealt with IBM. We're going to co-develop OS2 at the same time they were developing Windows to replace it. And everything and anything since that. They just executed. I remember when I started my first hosting company, we hosted on Sun UltraSpark machines. I'm sure a lot of you out here remember the UltraSpark Solaris. And we were using the Netscape web server software. I think it was actually that wasn't free. The browser was free. And Microsoft came out, Mike, you remember, NT 3.51. It's a funny number for the first iteration of an operating system, but it was Windows NT 3.51. And my office was with downtown New York, John Street, Silicon Alley, as we called it. And they made another reception like you're talking about. And I went down there, they invited us because we were a hosting company and they wanted us to switch. They were putting the hard press. You know how Microsoft was then. They were arrogant and they pressed hard. And they were putting the hard press on us to move over to Intel-based machines running Windows and NT, specifically 3.51, with IIS, Internet Information Server. And I said, guys, we looked at it. It's baby shit. It's baby stuff compared to Solaris and Netscape and the options I have there. I said, even if you're giving it to me for free, and they were giving it to me for free back then, I wouldn't use it. And the guy looked at me. I forget his name, but he looked at me. We were in a bar in downtown. And he said, Alan, I'm going to tell you something. We're Microsoft. It may not be as good as Netscape is right now. And NT may not be good as Solaris. But it's only our first iteration. Give us 3 iterations and the world will standardize on this. And if you don't, you'll be left behind. And I laughed and I let him buy me another drink. They are always good at buying drinks though too, Mike, you know that? And you know what? 3 iterations later, NT4.0 and on, IIS became the dominant web server and NT, Solaris, Linux killed all the Unixes and it became Linux or Windows. Those were your choices. So that, just reminiscing a little.
The funny thing is, if you look at Azure, there's more instances of Linux running in there than Windows is right now.
Somewhere Steve Ballmer's not happy.
Yeah.
That's not how they captured the market. I remember when my first PC I bought, Gateway Computers. It came in a big box. It looked like a cow.
Black and white cow box, sure.
I loved it. I kept that box for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Longer than I kept the PC, actually. And you know what I installed on it initially?
What?
It's a little piece of software called QuarterDeck.
I remember QuarterDeck.
That's what I installed first, and it was really helpful. I would excuse it fairly quickly because I was all about learning the command line. I was all about learning DOS as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
So when Windows became affordable and started becoming the standard on PCs that were being shipped to people's homes, then all these young people, they hadn't even gotten into computers yet. I was actually at work developing on a Sun system and using Sun tools. So the PC was outside of the realm of a corporate office. But as soon as they created a massive industry of selling PCs. Remember how big Gateway used to be?
Sure.
And all of them were running Windows. So
Dell,
adoption,
too, for that matter.
adoption was their secret weapon. They taught us all to use Windows. So what was happening is young people were going into the workforce that had been using Windows. They wanted to use Windows. They didn't want to use Sun. They didn't want to use Solaris. They didn't want to use QuarterDeck. They didn't, there was several different options. The two choices that they wanted were either they got an Apple for Christmas or they got a PC for Christmas. And that's where they were playing their games. That's what they were starting to program on. And it actually started changing the culture in general around women in tech at the same time. Because it wasn't little girls who were getting Apple computers or PCs, it was little boys. So that created and changed the industry in a really, really drastic way, is selling it and getting it into the hands of the consumer, not just businesses. So by the time those people wanted to go to work, they were not going to be, they wanted PCs. And I believe that's how they changed the industry. It made a huge difference for me. I was an OS2 bigot for a very long time. So I had OS2 running on my machine for
I was an OS2 user too for a long time.
And I did a lot of work for IBM.
And I still swear it was better than Windows.
It was.
Probably.
But they did not take it to the consumer.
No. Mm-hmm. Well, they did, but by then it was all over. Like when Warp came out.
I was walking through an airport and I saw a ThinkPad with Windows running on it and an ad. And I just had a little shit fit right there. Just like, what are you doing, OS2? Why are you putting, an ad for a ThinkPad with Windows running on it? And that was the moment I realized OS2 had lost.
Mm-hmm. As I look back in time and I remember all the lawsuits about Microsoft's dominance and how much that took up our time, I wonder, does technology in itself just prevent any one company from becoming all that dominant in the first place? And maybe this isn't something we need to worry about from a legal point of view. It's just that, I don't think Microsoft saw Linux and Amazon coming. And the world shifted, and now they're a number 2 in a cloud space rather than a number 1, and they're far from dominant. And I just wonder, as we look forward to AI, is that going to play out again and again? And maybe we as consumers and users of tech, we're just going to make that shift with our wallets rather than worrying about per se anybody being one dominant soul.
But you know what? They were late to the internet, right? They were late to the internet. I still remember having to install TCP/IP as a separate stack to be able to even get on the internet on a Windows machine. They were late to the internet, but yet they overcame it. They were late to the cloud, for sure. They missed the cloud for a large part. But yet here they are at number 2, right? They were late to security. Man, all my friends in security, we used to hate Microsoft. There was no security. They started Trustworthy Computing and hired some of the best security people in the world. And within relatively 3 to 5 years, they became security. They changed security. We all used to pay for AV, right? Then they made Windows Defender free, and that changed that market. They have disrupted markets time and time again, not necessarily being the first to the market, but disrupting the market nevertheless, owning it. So I give them all the credit in the world. They're far from perfect. They've been arrogant over the years, God knows. But you got to give credit where credit's due. They changed the world.
Yeah. And their argument has always been that, putting things into the OS or at the application layer that are features of other things, they would say that AV wasn't a market. They would say that it's a capability that needs to be a core component that's accessible to everybody. And therefore, our God-given right to innovation is that we can put new capabilities into the operating system. And that's what we're doing to benefit end users. And, if 3 or 4 companies get run over in the process, well, that's just called the nature of the game. So I think, what we keep defining as markets has always been ill-defined to me. And, where one piece of software sits in a stack versus another changes over time.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Let me ask Sulagna, we haven't heard from you, so I'm going to ask you a question if it's okay. We've been looking back at the last 50 years. What do you think about Microsoft in the next 50 years? Will there be a 100th celebration?
I certainly think there would be. I remember reading this article on Wired. So back in 2010, when deep learning had just emerged into the scene, Microsoft was still mostly occupied with Windows and Office. But when Satya Nadella became the CEO and appointed his first AI scientist with the mission to embed AI across the product line, and then they had the $1 billion OpenAI partnership, and then things just started to turn around. And it within less than 2 years, I think, they became a $3 trillion company. So really, it hasn't been so long, come to think of it, that Microsoft has started on this AI journey, and now it's full speed ahead. So I'm hopeful. I think that, yes, definitely there is going to be a 100th year celebration for Microsoft, because it is really one of those mainstay companies. We can't think of computers without companies like IBM and Microsoft. And I know Intel has totally gone off the rails, but hopefully Microsoft will see for another 5 decades for sure.
There's
let's remember that IBM is over 100 years old.
Yes,
so.
they are.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who are asking questions about whether OpenAI will do to Microsoft what Microsoft did to IBM. Is that possible?
Very possible. I think it's also possible that OpenAI winds up being owned by Microsoft.
Yep.
Yeah. Looking forward to that hostile takeover of Microsoft by Tesla. Is that where you're going with that one?
Well, no. So now I hear that Elon says his group will withdraw the offer if OpenAI promises to remain not-for-profit, which they will, because I think Altman wants to spin ChatGPT out as the for-profit company. But, as with most things, when you peel away the smoke and mirrors, who knows what's real?
I think that one person we're forgetting in this conversation is Bill Gates himself. He has demonstrated a unique quality in leadership in this field. Mm-hmm. Even after he left the company, we continued to look up to him for new ideas, even if it wasn't in computer science. Maybe it was in, biotech. He has acted in a different way from the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musks. He really has. And I think that there's a karma he's created for himself, that part of the reason why Microsoft has been so popular is because so many technologists like myself, who has been around for quite some time and gave up OS2 and started embracing the Microsoft platform, is because we looked up to Bill Gates himself. I wasn't a fan of Paul Allen at all, but I really was a fan of Bill Gates, and he represented Microsoft to me.
There was that movie about Jobs and Gates, and I forgot the name of the movie. It's an older movie now. But in many ways, how that defined, the PC era, but also the modern tech era, right? I mean, you could have Hewlett and Packard working in their garages in the classic Silicon Valley, and of course, IBM and Cisco. But, when I think of Bill Gates, I think of Steve Jobs. And when I think of Steve Jobs, I think of Bill Gates. Very different people, very different personalities. But the impact that they've had and their companies endure. They're both, Sulagna, you mentioned $3 trillion, right? They're both $3 trillion companies or more. So amazing stuff.
When we think about philanthropy, though, we think about
Yeah,
Bill Gates.
well, Steve Jobs, unfortunately, Steve Jobs passed away way too young. But his wife does a lot of philanthropy.
Yes, she does. Yes, I was going to say, so Melinda...
And so does Melinda, for that matter.
Yes.
But then again, so does Jeff Bezos' first wife, right? So
Yes.
there's a lesson there somewhere, too. Happy Valentine's Day. Let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang, and we'll come back to talk about our next topic.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back and we're going to move on to cloud security. There's been a lot of shifts and movements, and frankly, I'm not entirely sure exactly how this is all going to play out, but it started last week with Palo Alto Networks launching Cortex Cloud, which they combined with their Prisma, that's Prisma CNAP platform. And CNAP was this category that emerged in recent years. It stands for Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, coined by Gartner, as I recall. And the idea was that there was going to be this separate platform apart from the existing cloud security platforms that people would deploy. And now Palo Alto Networks seems to be saying, well, maybe it is all just one integrated platform and one thing with cloud security. At the same time last week, Checkpoint and Wiz got together and announced a partnership. And Checkpoint is still pretty dominant in the on-premises world, and Wiz is one of probably the leader at this point of CNAP. Alan, your take here. What's going on? Is this CNAP space going to just kind of pull back into what Palo Alto Network now calls platformization? Or is there still all these separate categories?
So, Mike, I think it was General Douglas MacArthur who said, old software never dies, it just fades away. Or maybe it wasn't software. But old software never dies. It just doesn't. It gets platformized. It goes into the woodwork, so to speak. So this whole CNAP thing, not that CNAP, what it did isn't important and it wasn't vital and it wasn't a good thing, but raise your hand if you've had enough of Gartner creating acronyms for what it is we do, right? I lived, this was part of my life, right? Too bad Mitchell's not on today. When we came out with we didn't call it a NAC, Network Access Control product. We called it something else. But of course, Gartner decided that category was NAC. They decided this one was CNAP. They have a new one now for continuous security, something monitoring, CSMAC or something. I've had enough of their acronyms, quite frankly. However,
you don't believe in mythical quadrants? I'm surprised.
No. And that's a whole nother, wave. But anyway, when it comes to CNAP specifically, look, it was always cloud security. They kind of threw me for a loop when they said the cloud native, because I started thinking Kubernetes and everything. But the fact of the matter is, CNAP wasn't necessarily as cloud native as cloud native would, the way I think of cloud native. Mm. It was cloud security, and with a Gartner acronym in front of it. It always was. But, when you look at the hype cycle, and then when you look at the life cycle of security products, they all go, I said this last week, they go from products to features. That's the way of it. They go from products to features. And that's what's happened here with CNAP. It went from a product to a feature. Now, specifically for Palo Alto is a funny bird, right? Palo Alto made their bones, well, you were dating cheerleaders. No, Palo Alto made their bones as a next generation firewall, right? That's what Palo Alto was, and then they made some smart plays actually in cloud native security, right? And in cloud security. And they spun up the Prisma cloud security. And then they made some more acquisitions, Cortex being another one. And, I think all along, this is not new. They just gave it a new name. But they've been building a cloud security platform forever. You don't need 3 different cloud security platforms just because Gartner gave them an acronym. So this is a logical step. And look, quite frankly, the next gen firewall business ain't exactly what it used to be with all of this cloud stuff. They had to make a significant bet on the cloud. And I think they've consolidated their bet. They put all their wood now behind one arrow. And that's what they're going to market with. That's what they'll tell you.
I think part of the conversation too is that customers are sick of buying multiple things and they just want to buy one
security.
thing.
They want a cloud security. Right.
Right. So if that's the case, what's your speculation on did Wiz and Checkpoint just not go far enough and they need to merge?
Well, I think in retrospect, Wiz should have taken the last offer they had on the table. Right? Was it Google? Yeah. It was crazy money. They should have taken the money. I learned this. A guy named Len Fassler, who I sold my first company to along with Brad Feld, told me once, you got an offer on the table. If someone's willing to reach in their pocket and write a check and give you money, take the money. Right? Assuming it's not ridiculously low. They should have taken the money. I don't know if Checkpoint is in a position to actually buy Wiz. I think it might at this point be a merger of equals when you look at valuations and so forth. But opportunity comes and goes in technology and in startups and in companies like this. And I wonder, has Wiz missed its window? And now they're going to need to merge with a Checkpoint or something, as I said, to have that broader platform versus just being a CNAP. Or are they the rare bird that escapes gravity and flies high enough to become their own platform? Right? Every once in a while, out of every 10,000 companies or whatever, you see one that escapes gravity and becomes the platform. We saw it with CrowdStrike. Who thought CrowdStrike was going to be what it is, right? It became, and maybe Wiz is one of those, but I hope the odds are forever in their favor. I don't know.
Tracy, should you always take the money?
I've walked away from money before, and sometimes I think back and say, was that the right thing? But when I look at what happened after, I stepped away and said, it's not all about the money. We made more money in the long run. Kind of stretched it out, and it provided us a little more freedom to do what we wanted to do with the product. So I think from, a purely number standpoint, probably take the money and run. But I don't know where it's hard to see where these products are going and how much freedom that they want to have in choosing what they're going to do. If you think about Checkpoint, some of the complaints I hear around Checkpoint is that it's kind of heavy. It's got a lot of performance overhead. It just is, it's not agentless, right? I talk about that a lot. And Wiz is. So, I think that they have a dream that they're trying to follow, and maybe that's why they didn't take the money when it was offered. And I think there's more work to do in this area. I really do. So I'm hoping Wiz continues with its work. Palo Alto is not my friend. I don't like them anymore for reasons we won't go into. But there's so much to be done in this area, particularly around, container scanning and security. If we're going to do that in production, how do we do that? How do we do it safe? There's just more to do in this area. Kubernetes is complex, and we need these kind of tools to build some guardrails around them, and that's what these cloud native tools do. So I'm pushing for. I'm hoping that Wiz takes it a little farther.
Yeah. Sulagna, one of the things we didn't talk about is the impact AI is having on this particular space, because part of the issue, I think, is going to be I need to aggregate all the data to train the models. And if all the data is sitting in all these different repositories, I really can't have 7 or 8 different products that I'm trying to organize. I need to kind of put that into some sort of cohesive place. So is it your impression here that maybe AI is forcing all this convergence and consolidation around a platform?
It is definitely one of the reasons. And with Codex Cloud, it's really another example of the obsession over single pane of glass experience, everything, security, or wherever it is, all in one console. The beauty of it is that it saves users from having to deal with 10 different tools, a whole box of it, and maintain oversight of everything from just one solution. And at the back end with this product, Palo Alto is also using the data to train its AI models that powers its security portfolio. So it's also a good way to consolidate their sprawling portfolio over often competing products, hard sales for each other. So I think definitely AI is a big part of it, but it also serves the interests of the companies and also in some way meet the customer expectations of consolidating their whole entire toolbox.
Fair enough. We need to close out on this block, but I'll also say this. Checkpoint is a firewall company too, and they've moved to endpoint and in a lot of big places. But like Palo, they're searching for the next anchor there, right? For the next thing to really build around. So it'll be interesting. We can go on all day. Is innovation dead in security? Where's the innovation coming from? AI, maybe. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
All right, folks, we're back and we're talking about, AI and copyright again. There's been some movement in this space with Thomson Reuters winning at least the first round of a lawsuit. There's probably going to be an appeal, but the judge ruled that you cannot take their data to go train an AI model without their permission. And this issue is at the heart of any number of lawsuits that are still floating around out there. And there's even now a bill floating around the state of California, which says that if someone takes your data to train an AI model and it's copyrighted, you need to be alerted to that fact, and then you can decide what you want to do after that. But right now, a lot of folks didn't even know their data was being taken to train models, and some folks are even saying that all the data has already been taken. So the issue is kind of, how much are we going to compensate for? Because the AI guys are saying we don't have any more data. We need to go create some more. So Sulagna, what's your take on what's going on here? We have a couple of stories on Techstrong AI about this, but where does this all end?
So generative AI's IP infringement issue is a real problem. There are trademark materials all over the internet. There is unlicensed content and training data, and often no direct references to the copyrighted works. And AI apps are always using original works of creators without license, and there is, as you mentioned, a barrage of lawsuit around the use of unauthorized content. Now, as of now, there is no AI legislation like that is nationwide that applies to every state where it prevents companies from using any data that they that is available on the internet. But there's this proposed bill, like you said, that is in California that would require generative AI developers to at least inform the copyright owners when their data is used for training. So I think that eventually down the road, at some point, companies will, the lawmakers, it's definitely gaining the attention of the lawmakers, even though there is no concrete legislation yet. But I feel like somewhere down the road, there will be something that would block companies from randomly accessing licensed data for their training. But I don't see it happening anytime soon. So maybe in the future. But until then, we're going to have to deal with this, it looks like.
I feel, Alan, like this is a bold calculation where they're basically trying to figure out how much money can they make, and then if there's a lawsuit and they lose money on the lawsuit, they still made more money than they had to pay out on the lawsuit. So are we just kind of gambling here on a certain level with all this stuff?
I don't know if it's gambling, right? Well, wait. If you're Thomson Reuters or the Times or the Post or any individual, Techstrong, any individual content publisher, the lawsuit, yeah, it's a gamble and all of that thing. But there's a bigger principle at play here. There's a bigger principle at play here, and that is, what is the future of copyright? What is the future of IP ownership? Right? Because if we can't enforce it here, in law, there's a theory of what we call specific performance, which means you can't pay me enough money to truly compensate me for the damages I've incurred. I need you to specifically perform. And it may be that it's not about the money and the gambling here, as a gamble here. It's about a specific performance going forward, that this is how things get done or not how things get done. And I think that's what this fight is about. Forget Thomson Reuters for a second. Forget OpenAI or any of these individual brands, if you will. The bigger issue, and it especially applies when we look at China and some of the other parts of the world. We saw the EU saying they're going to back off some of the copyright IP regulations with AI that they were contemplating. How far are we backing off? Right? How is the concept of copyright and IP going to survive this?
Well, I would think if you asked OpenAI about DeepSeek and the distillation that they're claiming that they did, right? Isn't this kind of, I don't know, hypocritical for them to be?
Yeah,
don't steal my data, but let me.
Kendall.
Yeah, it is. It is. So you would think that it has to go to the courts. There's got to be better ways to do this. If copyright notices have to be put out, if people have to pay for data, then so be it. Because in order to move forward, we have to sort it out.
But what I'm trying to say, are the courts subject to the same political pressures that stopped the EU dead in its tracks here? We already have a vice president and administration that stands up and says the court can't tell the executive, the executive branch what to do. Right? They're questioning the power of the courts. And, if you're going to live in an authoritarian or whatever, if you're going to live in a dictatorship, they're going to tell you what you can do with your AI, with your copyright and your IP. And that is the bigger question.
It doesn't seem like there'll be any laws, at least on a national level, about any of this, but will the states kind of fill in that gap?
Well, I mean, I think it's a weird question to have, because do we throw out GDPR? Does that go away? Isn't there some impact there? everybody has tried to comply with these, these privacy compliance. And
When
isn't
you
this
build
kind of the same question?
when you build a system based on the rule of law, and you throw out the rule of law, this is what you got. It's called chaos. It's anarchy.
Mhm.
So, and it doesn't just apply to AI. It applies in a lot of places, and we're seeing it here. And I don't
That's what
care
I'm
who you
saying.
voted for. Rules are rules, laws are laws.
Not anymore, apparently.
No.
We're in a new world.
All right. I knew it was going to come to that sooner or later. It's about that time. It's about that time. Sulagna, thank you for joining us today. Tracy, as always, thank you. Mike, it's great seeing you. I'll see you later this week. We are in person in New York this week for some internal editorial meetings. Very excited. But for now, this is Alan Schimmel on behalf of Techstrong and the Techstrong Gang. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. We're out of here.